Another cycle. Another groan of stressed metal. The spire of rust never sleeps, not truly. It shifts between states of decay. My bunk, a cramped alcove hammered into a disused access tunnel, vibrated with the rhythmic clang of the salvage yard 2 levels below. Each clang was a credit earned, a micro-ration of synth protein bought, another breath taken in this coffin we called home. But each clang also echoed the dying gasps of our star. Bale. Once a glorious blue, now a swollen crimson giant, its light a malevolent, anemic glare that seeped through the viewport, painting everything in the rusty hues of impending doom. They say it used to be different. They say a lot of things. I sat up, the thin, recycled air scratching at my throat. My joints popped, a symphony of neglect, and the dull ache in my back was a familiar companion. 37 cycles old, and I felt like I was carrying the weight of the whole damn spire on my shoulders. Not that I was unique in that. Everyone on Rust wore the same stoop, the same 1,000-yard stare that came from knowing you were one faulty seal, one power surge away from the long dark. My eyes drifted to the faded photo chip stuck to the wall beside my bunk. 2 boys, grinning in front of a backdrop of the spire's interior, a tangle of pipes and girders that was all too familiar. Arlo, my younger brother, his arm slung around my shoulder. The photo was a common one, taken in one of the many automated booths that offered a brief, cheap escape from the monotony of life on Rust. He'd been gone for 15 cycles, taken by the rot. I traced the outline of his face, a familiar ritual of grief and guilt. The rot wasn't merely a disease, it was the star's curse upon us. They said it came from prolonged exposure to the decaying radiation, a slow corruption that ate you from the inside out. First it was the fatigue, the aches that never went away. Then came the lesions, mark of the star-sick, purplish and raw that refused to heal. In the later stages, your organs started to fail, your mind frayed, and your body twisted into something grotesque. Arlo had fought it bravely, but in the end his small frame had been no match for the star's toxic embrace. The treatments had cost a fortune, bled me dry, sold everything, including a few pieces of myself I wasn't proud of, all for nothing. The palliatives, the serums they sold on the lower levels, only slowed the inevitable. They soothed the pain, masked the symptoms for a while, but they couldn't stop the decay. The rot always wins. Another gift from our benevolent overlords. They hoarded the real medicine, the kind that worked, up in cinder, along with everything else that made life worth living. Rumor had it they were immune, their bodies somehow cleansed by their parasitic bonds. Just another way they were no longer human, if they ever had been. High Counselor Calvus, the chief parasite himself, probably hadn't spared a thought for the likes of us in decades. They said he was the first to merge, the architect of our misery, and that he hadn't aged a day since. I pushed myself out of the bunk, the chill of the deck plating biting through the thin soles of my boots. Time to earn my keep. I grabbed my salvage rig, a cutting torch, its nozzle scarred and blackened from countless hours of use, a multi-tool with worn-down edges, a diagnostic scanner that flickered erratically, and a magnetic grapple, its grip unreliable, all held together with scavenged wire and stubborn hope. The corridors of the lower levels were a claustrophobic maze of pipes, conduits, and access hatches. I passed other workers, their faces grim, their movements mechanical. We were all just cogs in a machine that was slowly grinding to a halt. I saw a man, not much older than me, trying to hide a trembling hand as he slumped against a bulkhead, his skin marked by stage 2 rot. It could have been any of us, really. I passed by the propaganda feeds, always showing the same images of Cinder's gleaming spires and the supposed prosperity enjoyed by those at the top. They never showed the faces of the overlords, of course, but everyone knew who ruled them all. High Counselor Calvus, the oldest of them all, the one who started it all. "Riven!" The voice, rough as sandpaper, cut through the din. Cronus. He was leaning against a stack of salvaged metal plating, his face barely visible in the gloom. He was old, even for a scavenger, his body a roadmap of scars and old injuries. He'd been working the yard since before I was born, and he knew the Spire's guts better than anyone. "Cronus," I nodded, joining him. "Another day in paradise." He grunted, a sound of cynical amusement. "Just try not to get yourself spaced today, eh? I'm getting too old to break in a new partner." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, checking the charge on my cutting torch. "Besides, who else would listen to your ramblings about the old days?" He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "They weren't all bad, kid. Before the rot. Before the Cinderlickers tightened their grip. Things were different. We had real food sometimes." "Hard to imagine," I muttered, thinking of Arlo again. It was easier to focus on the present, the tangible, than to dwell on a past I couldn't change. I decided to ask him about the rumors. "Heard anything about that find in Sector 7? Cronus's eyes narrowed, becoming almost invisible in the dimness. "Just loose talk. Probably some discarded tech the Cinder Dogs are trying to keep quiet. Don't get any ideas, Riven. That sector is off limits for a reason." "Just curious," I said, feigning indifference. "They say it was giving off some kind of energy signature. Something different." "Different gets you killed in this place," Cronus said, his voice low. He hesitated, then continued, his voice barely above a breath. "They say, long ago, when the star first started to fail, the Overlords, they found something. On one of the outer planets, a desolate, frozen rock. Parasites, alien things that could bond with a human host. They were supposed to enhance the mind, prolong life. But they changed them, Riven. Made them cold, ruthless. They say the parasites give them control over certain technologies, that they drink energy, the right kind, from the star, through their own bodies somehow. It's why they hoard the best for themselves, why they don't age, why they don't get the rot. It's also why they don't give a damn about us." He shook his head. "Probably just booster talk. Forget about it." He paused, then added, almost reluctantly, "Though I did hear the artifact was small, smooth, seamless, like a droplet of quicksilver frozen in time, and it seemed to drink the light, reflecting it back strangely, all bent and warped. But I couldn't. The image, however vague, took root in my mind. The workday was a constant grind of clanging metal and the searing heat of the torches. We sliced through metal, our torches spitting sparks, the air thick with the smell of burning alloys. We hauled scrap, dodged malfunctioning machinery, and ignored the emptiness in our stomachs. It was dangerous, back-breaking work, but it kept us alive. Later, after my shift, I found myself drawn to the lower-level market. I wasn't looking for supplies, not really. I needed information, and Bram was the best source I knew. He was a wiry, nervous man with shifty eyes, always flitting about his stall laden with data chips and scavenged components. He dealt in information as much as he dealt in goods, and he always seemed to know the latest rumors, especially the ones nobody wanted to talk about openly. The market buzzed with hushed deals and the aroma of illicit goods, bootleg synth alcohol, untested stims, and forbidden tech. But I barely noticed. My focus was on Bram. "Riven," he greeted me, his voice a low, conspiratorial drawl. "Got something special for you today. A job. High risk, high reward." "I'm listening," I said, my pulse quickening. "There's a piece of tech in Sector 7, he said, leaning closer. "A prototype, they say. Something the Cinder Dogs want back real bad. My client is willing to pay a premium for it. Enough to get you off Rust, maybe even to Verdant." Verdant, the agricultural spire. Not a paradise, but they say it's a place where you can breathe clean air, where the food, though rationed, comes from actual plants grown in soil, not just recycled synth paste. A place where the rot isn't a constant threat. "What's the catch?" I asked, my suspicion rising. "It's deep in the restricted zone," Bram admitted. "But you're the best I know at getting into places you shouldn't be." He grinned, revealing a missing tooth. And my client has connections. They can get you access codes, a map, the whole shebang. Who's your client? I asked. Bram hesitated. Let's just say they're interested in shaking things up a bit. They think this tech could be the key. He leaned in, his voice barely above a breath. Word is, it's tied to that other thing. The artifact they found. My heart hammered against my ribs. The artifact. It wasn't just booster talk. What do they know about it? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Not much, Bram admitted, but they believe it has something to do with the star. They think it can reignite it. He shrugged. Crazy talk, maybe, but they're paying enough to make it worth finding out. He looked at me intently. So, are you in? My mind raced. It was a fool's errand, a suicide mission, but the thought of escaping rust, of changing things, it was a powerful lure. I'm in, I said, the words escaping my lips before I could second-guess myself. Bram grinned, relief evident on his face. He handed me a data chip. Access codes, map, everything you need. Be careful, Riven. This is bigger than both of us. As I turned to leave, he called out, Oh, and Riven. The children of the dying star have been asking about you. Be careful who you trust. My hand froze on the data chip. The children of the dying star. A fringe cult that had sprung up in the lower levels, worshipping the dying sun as a god in its final, glorious throes. They believed its death was a prelude to some kind of cosmic rebirth, and they were always searching for signs and portents, for artifacts that could hasten the process. They were considered harmless fanatics by most, but they had a network of informants that rivaled Bram's, and their intense devotion could make them dangerous. Why they would be interested in me, I had no idea. Maybe they'd heard rumors about my salvage work, my knack for finding things others missed. Or maybe it was something more. I shoved the unsettling thought aside. I had a job to do. The restricted zone was eerily quiet. The air was cleaner, and the lights brighter than in the grimy squalor of the lower levels. I followed the map Bram had given me. I bypassed security checkpoints, the access codes on the data chip working like a charm. The silence was broken only by the occasional whir of a surveillance drone, which I managed to avoid with practiced ease. I saw no guards, no sign of life, only powered-down machinery and empty corridors. Finally, I reached my destination. A sealed vault, its entrance marked with a faded warning sign. The artifact was inside. I entered the final code, and the vault door opened, revealing a small, darkened chamber. In the center of the room, resting on a pedestal, was the object of my search. It was a metallic sphere, no bigger than my fist, seamless and smooth, like a drop of quicksilver frozen in time. It wasn't glowing, but it seemed to drink the ambient light, the reflections on its surface warped and strange. As I reached out, my fingers passed through an invisible resistance before making contact. A jolt, like static electricity, ran up my arm. The world shifted, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the dying star. Not as the bloated red giant that loomed over us, but as a vibrant blue star, radiant and healthy as Cronus said it used to be. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me breathless and disoriented. The brief glimpse had burned away some of my doubt, giving me something to cling to, as alarms began to blare throughout the sector. I grabbed the sphere, its surface unexpectedly cool beneath my fingers, and shoved it into a pouch on my belt. Footsteps, heavy, metallic and coming fast. The Wardens, the enforcers of the Overlords clad in armor that amplified their movements, a terrifying blend of human and machine. I turned and fled, the artifact firm against my hip. They were close behind, their heavy boots pounding the metal, their shouts echoing through the corridors. Adrenaline surged through me as I sprinted through the maze-like structure, my knowledge of the Spire's layout my only advantage. I scrambled through access tunnels, slid down maintenance shafts, and crawled through ventilation ducts, the Wardens hot on my heels. They were firing now, energy blasts scorching the walls around me, the whine of their weapons a terrifying chorus. I burst through a hatch leading to a lower level, hoping to lose them in the chaos of the working sectors. A figure stepped out in front of me. Cronus. He raised his hand, not in greeting, but to point a jury-rigged laser emitter in my direction. It was cobbled together from salvaged parts, wires exposed and sparking, a focusing lens precariously held in place with scavenged clamps. "Down!" he roared, just as an energy blast ripped through the space where I had been standing a moment before. I hit the deck as Cronus fired his jury-rigged laser emitter, a raw, unstable beam of light lancing through the air, forcing the pursuing wardens to take cover. "Cronus, what the—" I started, scrambling to my feet. "No time," he snapped, grabbing my arm and pulling me away. We ran, the warden's shouts growing closer again. Cronus, despite his age, moved with surprising speed, his knowledge of the Spire's hidden passages our only hope. He led me through a labyrinth of tunnels and corridors, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind us. We reached a dead end, a sealed bulkhead blocking our path. Cronus slammed his hand against a hidden panel, revealing a set of manual override controls. "This is as far as I go," he said, his voice grim. "This leads to an old escape route. It's your only chance." "What about you?" I asked, my voice tight with a sudden, unexpected fear for the old scavenger. "I'll buy you some time," he said, turning to face the oncoming wardens. "Get that thing out of here, Riven. Do something with it. Don't let it all be for nothing." A second later, he added, "And tell Bram to shove his credits." He didn't wait for a reply. He charged towards the wardens, his laser emitter spitting a jagged, unstable beam of energy. I watched him go, a lump forming in my throat. He was buying me time, just like he said, a distraction so that I could get away. It was a suicide mission, and we both knew it. I hesitated for a moment, torn between staying and helping him or escaping as he intended, then turned and entered the code into the override panel. The bulkhead opened, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel. I took one last look back, but Cronus was already gone, swallowed by the shadows and the sounds of battle. I stepped into the tunnel, the bulkhead closing behind me with a final clang, leaving me alone in the darkness, with the artifact heavy on my hip and the echoes of Cronus's sacrifice ringing in my ears. The escape tunnel was blacker than the space between stars. I fumbled along, my hands outstretched, tracing the damp metal of the tunnel walls. I risked a quick burst from my scanner's light, revealing a narrow service shaft, barely large enough for me to squeeze through. It was an old, disused passage, probably dating back to the Spire's construction, a relic of a time when they still planned for emergencies, before apathy and decay had set in. Cronus's sacrifice echoed in my mind. He'd bought me time, a chance to escape, and I couldn't waste it. I had to get the artifact out, figure out what it was and what it could do. The image of the revitalized star, the brief vision I'd experienced when I first touched the sphere, flashed in my memory. What if Bram was right? What if this thing could actually reignite the star? And what would happen then? I reached into my belt pouch, my fingers closing around the smooth surface of the artifact. It felt inert now, dormant, but I could sense a latent energy within it, a potential waiting to be unlocked. I pulled it out, and in the faint light filtering from my scanner, I examined it again. The sphere was seamless, its surface reflecting the dim light in a way that made my eyes ache. It was like staring into a distorted mirror, a miniature universe contained within a metal shell. As I held it, a faint warmth began to emanate from the sphere, spreading through my hand and up my arm. It was a subtle sensation, like the warmth of blood flow, not unpleasant but undeniably alien. The air around me shimmered, and I saw them again, fleeting images, visions like a broken data stream floating through my mind. I saw the star, not as the dying ember it was now, but as a blazing blue giant, full of life and energy. I saw the spires, not as decaying husks, but as gleaming structures, teeming with people. their surfaces reflecting the vibrant starlight. I saw a world bathed in the glow of a healthy sun, a world where the rot did not exist, where hope was not a forgotten dream. I saw the planets, no longer frozen or scorched, but teeming with life, vibrant and green. Just as quickly, the vision shifted. I saw the star again, but this time it was different. It was writhing, convulsing, its surface a maelstrom of energy. I saw something within it, vast and dark, stirring in the stellar depths. It was a formless entity, a being of immense power, its presence radiating a sense of ancient cosmic dread. I saw extensions of the entity itself surging outward, consuming everything in their path. The vision vanished, leaving me trembling, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. What had I done? Was this artifact a key to salvation, as Bram's client believed, or a harbinger of destruction? Was I a pawn in some larger game, a game I didn't understand? I shoved the artifact back into my pouch. I had to keep moving. The tunnel stretched on forever, twisting and turning, leading me deeper into the Spire's underbelly. I lost track of time, my only focus on putting as much distance as possible between myself and the Wardens. Finally, I reached the end of the tunnel. It opened into a large, cavernous space, an abandoned section of the lower levels. I found a secluded alcove, a small maintenance closet, behind a tangle of fallen conduits, and decided to make it my temporary refuge. I sealed the entrance as best as I could, using rubble and scrap metal to create a barricade. Exhausted, I slumped against the wall. The silence was absolute, save for the groans of the aging spire, amplifying the sense of isolation. I needed to figure out my next move. I couldn't stay here forever. The Wardens would be searching for me, and sooner or later they would find me. I needed help, someone who could shed some light on this artifact and its power. But who could I trust? Bram was out of the question. He was a middleman, a profiteer, and I doubted his loyalty extended beyond his credits. Then I remembered what he said, just before I left. The children of the dying star have been asking about you. They were the only ones I could think of who might have some understanding of the star and its mysteries. They were fanatics, certainly, but they were also deeply connected to the lower levels, with a network of informants that stretched throughout Rust. And they believed the star's death was a prelude to rebirth, a concept that resonated with the visions I had seen. Finding them wouldn't be easy. They operated in secret, their gatherings hidden from the prying eyes of the Wardens, but I knew where to start looking. The lower-level markets were the heart of Rust's underground, a place where information flowed as freely as contraband goods. If anyone knew how to contact the children of the dying star, it would be someone there. After resting and patching up my injuries as best as I could with my meager supplies, I ventured out, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the main thoroughfares. The lower levels were even more chaotic than usual. The Spire-wide lockdown had disrupted the flow of supplies, and tensions were running high. I saw fights break out over scraps of food, heard arguments erupt over dwindling resources. The Wardens were everywhere, their presence a constant oppressive force. I finally reached the market, an assault of sights, sounds, and smells. I moved through the crowd, searching for a familiar face, someone I could trust even if it was just a little. I scanned the faces, searching for a hint of recognition, a sign that I was on the right track. I saw a young man, with wide, frightened eyes, his face marked by the telltale purple lesions of the early stages of the rot. He was clutching a tattered piece of cloth, a crude drawing of the dying star emblazoned upon it, the symbol of the children of the dying star. He was handing out flyers, his voice hoarse, barely audible above the din of the market. "The star calls to us," he croaked, his voice cracking. "Join the children of the dying star, embrace the transformation, find salvation in the final light." Most people ignored him, pushing past, their faces hardened by cynicism and despair. But a few stopped, their eyes lingering on the symbol, a flicker of something, hope perhaps, or desperation, crossing their faces. I approached him, my hand resting on the pouch containing the artifact. "I need to speak to your elder," I said, my voice low. He looked up at me, his eyes widening in surprise. He studied my face, searching for any sign of deception. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Riven," I said, "and I have something that might interest him, something that belongs to the star." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Follow me," he said, turning and disappearing into the crowd. He guided me through a maze of back alleys and hidden passages, away from the bustling market area and deeper into the underbelly of the Spire. The warmth of the crowds faded, and a chill settled in, not just from the drop in temperature, but from a growing sense of isolation. The silence was broken only by the drip of condensation and the scuttling of rats. At last, we arrived at a concealed entrance, a section of wall that slid open, revealing a passage beyond. "Wait here," he said, slipping through the opening. "I will tell Elder Matthias you are here." I waited, the silence a breeding ground for doubt. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, mirroring the energy I felt emanating from the artifact in my grasp. It felt warm now, almost alive, and the darkness around me deepened, as if the sphere was absorbing what little light remained. The young man returned. "He will see you," he said, his voice hushed with an unsettling reverence. He stepped aside, inviting me into the unknown. I entered the passage, the wall sliding shut behind me. The passage opened into a large chamber, poorly lit by flickering candles. In the center of the room, a group of people knelt in a circle, their heads bowed, their bodies swaying rhythmically. At the far end of the chamber, seated on a raised platform, was an old man. His face was bony, his eyes deep-set, his skin marked by the advanced stages of the rot. But despite his ravaged appearance, he radiated an aura of power, of authority. This had to be Elder Matthias. As I approached, the chanting stopped. The people in the circle turned to look at me, their faces pale in the candlelight. Their eyes, wide and unblinking, bored into my soul. "You have come," Elder Matthias said, his voice raspy but strong. "You carry the star's touch." "I have something I believe you should see," I said, approaching. I reached into my pouch and pulled out the artifact, holding it up for him to see. A collective gasp swept through the chamber. The people in the circle leaned forward, their eyes fixed on the sphere. Elder Matthias rose from his seat, his movements slow but determined. He descended from the platform and approached me, his stare piercing. "The heart of the star," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. "It has returned." He reached out a shaking hand, his fingers gnarled and twisted by the rot, brushing against the surface of the artifact. A faint, blue light flickered within the sphere, responding to his touch. The air in the chamber crackled with energy, and I felt a tingling sensation run through my body. "What is it?" I asked. "What does it do?" "It is the key," Matthias said, his eyes shining with an almost feverish light. "The key to the star's rebirth. It is the catalyst that will awaken the supreme being within and bring about the final transformation." "The supreme being? You mean the thing I saw in the visions? The darkness in the star?" Matthias smiled, a thin, unsettling smile. "It is not darkness, my son," he said. "It is the source, the beginning and the end. It is the force that gives the star its life, and it is the force that will ultimately consume it, only to birth it anew." "But what about us?" I asked. "What about the Spires? What will happen to us when the star is reignited?" "We will be cleansed," Matthias said, his voice rising in fervor. "We will be purified. We will become one with the star, a part of the great cycle of creation and destruction." This was madness. They were planning to use the artifact to reignite the star, to awaken the entity within regardless of the consequences. They were willing to sacrifice themselves, to sacrifice everyone on the Spires for their twisted vision of salvation. The chamber's entrance was suddenly ripped open. Dark figures, their armor glinting in the candlelight, stormed in, weapons raised. Wardens. Their eyes scanned the room, pausing when they found me. One raised a hand, pointing directly at me, barking orders in a sharp, metallic voice. Panic seized the cultists. Candles were knocked over, plunging us into near darkness, punctuated by the muzzle flashes of energy weapons, creating strobing, disorienting light as energy fire erupted, followed by screams and the thud of bodies. I instinctively backed away, my hand tightening around the artifact. Chaos erupted. The children of the dying star, startled from their ritual, scrambled in the darkness. I could hear screams, shouts, and the thud of bodies hitting the floor. "This way," a voice hissed in my ear. It was Elder Matthias. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "We must protect the heart of the star." He pulled me through the darkness, away from the fighting, towards a hidden passage at the back of the chamber. We stumbled through the narrow tunnel, the sounds of battle echoing behind us. I could hear the wardens' shouts, their heavy boots pounding on the floor. We had to escape, get the artifact away from them, away from everyone. "Where are we going?" I asked, struggling to keep up with Matthias. "To the core," he said, his voice breathless. "To the heart of the Spire. It is the closest point to the star, the place where the artifact's power will be strongest. But that's where they'll be looking for us," I protested. "It's a trap." "It is our destiny," Matthias insisted. "We must fulfill the prophecy. We must awaken the star." Matthias, despite his frail appearance, was surprisingly agile. He navigated the service tunnels beneath the spire with a familiarity that spoke of countless secret journeys. We were heading towards the central core, the nexus of the spire's energy network, the closest point to the star's siphoning mechanisms. It was a move so obvious it was almost certainly anticipated by Calvus. "They knew about the artifact," I said, my voice echoing in the narrow tunnel. "Calvus knew what it could do." "They have always known," Matthias rasped. "They have suppressed the truth for generations, fearing the star's true power." "But why?" I asked. "Why cling to a dying star when they could have reignited it long ago?" "Control," Matthias said, a cruel smile twisting his lips. The dying star was predictable, its energy easily manipulated. A full, vibrant star, that is a power they could not hope to contain. They feared the supreme being, feared its awakening. The entity within the star. Was it truly a malevolent force, as the Overlords believed, or something else entirely? The visions I had seen when I touched the artifact were ambiguous, open to interpretation. Was it a destroyer or a creator, or both? We reached the central core, a vast cylindrical chamber that housed the Spire's primary energy conduit. This was the heart of Rust, the point where the Spire's lifeblood was drawn from the dying star. It was also a strategic choke point, heavily guarded even during normal operation. Now, with the Spire on lockdown, it would be swarming with wardens. As if summoned by my thoughts, the chamber doors opened, revealing a squad of wardens, their energy weapons raised. Leading them was Calvus. His eyes, once human, now glowed with the same light as the Overlord's parasites, their humanity almost entirely eroded. "You cannot be allowed to proceed, Riven," Calvus said. "The artifact is too dangerous. It must be contained." "You're a parasite-ridden monster, clinging to a fading power," I retorted. My hand tightened around the artifact. "This is about saving lives, about saving our star." "Saving?" Calvus's laugh was as cold and empty as space. "You are a fool, Riven, a sentimental fool. The star's natural state is not our salvation. It is our extinction. Do you not see that it has grown hostile to us? Look at the rot. Look at the state of our system." "The rot is your fault!" I exclaimed. "Perhaps, but it matters not," Calvus continued. "Once, long ago, we, the Overlords, sought to save humanity by preventing the star's supernova, redirecting its energy through the Spires. We failed to contain its full power, and we paid the price. The parasites were our solution. They allowed us to interface with the star, to control it, even in its weakened state. But they also showed us the truth." "The truth?" I asked incredulously. "The truth is that the star is not merely a celestial body. It is a living entity, And like any living entity, it has a consciousness, Calvus said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. When we attempted to harness its energy, we angered it. The rot was its defense, a natural attempt at self-preservation. So rather than reignite it, fix what you broke. You and your kind suppressed it, further perverted its energies to fuel your tyrannical rule, I replied angrily. What gives you the right? We had to maintain a delicate balance, Calvus responded. We suppressed the star's consciousness, kept it dormant to prevent it from fully awakening and unleashing its wrath. The artifact threatens to undo all of that. It will awaken the star and with it, the entity within. You talk as though the star is some kind of monster, I said, confused. It is a force of nature, Riven, Calvus stated coldly. Vast, ancient, uncaring. It does not share our concerns. It does not value our lives. Its awakening will be the end of us. The final confrontation was brutal. Wardens opened fire, energy blasts ricocheting off the walls. Matthias, chanting in his guttural language, charged towards the wardens, his frail body moving with surprising speed. He seemed to be drawing on some hidden reserve of strength, his body fueled by a fanatic's zeal. He managed to disarm one of the wardens before a blast caught him square in the chest. He crumpled to the floor, his body convulsing, then lay still. I ducked behind a section of the conduit, using it as cover. I had to reach the central core, had to use the artifact before it was too late. I could feel its energy thrumming against my palm, urging me forward. Calvus advanced, his movements swift and precise. He was a formidable opponent, his body enhanced by the parasite, his reflexes sharpened, his strength amplified. He was a predator, and I was his prey. I managed to hold my own for a while, using my knowledge of the Spire's layout to my advantage. I was a scavenger, a survivor, and I knew how to fight dirty. But Calvus was too strong, too fast. He cornered me, his energy weapon aimed at my heart. It is over, Riven, he said, his voice devoid of triumph, only a cold, clinical detachment. The artifact will be mine. In a last desperate act, I hurled the artifact towards the central core. It sailed through the air, a silver sphere against the backdrop of the dying star's crimson glow. Calvus, caught off guard, turned to follow its trajectory. As the artifact connected with the central core, a blinding light engulfed the chamber. I was thrown back, my body slamming against the wall. I felt a surge of energy, raw and untamed, course through my veins, through the spire, through everything. The red light of the dying star was gone, replaced by a brilliant blue glow. The spire was bathed in the light of a revitalized sun, a light that felt different, alive, vibrant. It was the light I had seen in my vision, the light of a healthy star. I looked around, dazed, disoriented. The wardens were gone, their bodies disintegrated by the energy surge. Calvus was on his knees, his body convulsing. The parasitic glow in his eyes had faded, replaced by a look of horror, of utter defeat. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice weak, human once more. "What you should have done long ago." As I watched, the last vestiges of the parasite's control withered away. Calvus, once the most powerful man in the system, was reduced to a frail, broken old man. He looked up at the blue light, his eyes filled with fear and wonder, then slumped to the floor, his body still. The star was alive. I could feel it, a presence, vast and ancient, filling the void. It was not the malevolent entity Calvus had described, but something else, something symbiotic. The artifact, now glowing with the same blue light as the star, floated back to me, as if drawn by an invisible force. As I reached out to touch it, I understood. The cosmic entity was not a separate being, but the star's consciousness, its life force. The Overlords, in their arrogance, had sought to control it, to suppress it, fearing its power. But in doing so, they had nearly destroyed it, and with it, themselves. The reignition had not only restored the star to its original state, eradicating the rot, but it had also awakened its consciousness. And now, it was communicating with me, through the artifact. Images flooded my mind, not fragmented visions this time, but a clear, coherent message. I saw the spires, not as prisons but as vessels, arcs. I saw the planets of the system, no longer barren wastelands but fertile worlds teeming with life. I saw humanity not as a dying race clinging to the remnants of a dying star, but as a species reborn, spreading life throughout the system, guided by the star's consciousness. The star was not a god, not a monster, but a partner, a symbiont. We were to be its gardeners, its shepherds, tending to the new life that would bloom on the planets, guided by its ancient wisdom. The artifact was not a weapon, but a key, a conduit, a means of communication between our species and the living star. It was a responsibility, a burden, and a gift. I sank to my knees, the artifact warm in my hand. The future was uncertain, terrifying, and exhilarating all at once. We had been given a second chance, a chance to rebuild, to start anew, not as conquerors or overlords, but as partners, as symbionts with a living star. We had a whole living system to explore and a new purpose. We were to become the gardeners of a new Eden, guided by the wisdom of a star that had finally found its voice. And I, Riven, the scavenger from the Spire of Rust, had a part to play in this grand cosmic design. The star was alive, and so were we.